Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of the People Progressing podcast. And today, I've been wanting to get Ryan Nichols on for a long time. He's an ex player of ours and student at Thunder Ridge High School, and it's just an amazing kid who spent 20 years in the Marines, did some deployments, so forth. We're going to get into today. But Ryan, I thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy. You're about ready to start a new job in a new city in a new state, and wrapping up your old internship and all that kind of stuff. So taking the time is not easy for you, and I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And one of the things I always do, I want people to get to know you a little bit. So, like where you grew up, what'd you like to do as a kid, some of the things that influenced you, people that might have influenced you, sports, drama, band, whatever it was, or any of your parents, who were some of those influences in your life? Just let's get to know Ryan a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. So I grew up before I joined the Marine Corps when I was 20 years old. And I'll get to that point, but grew up my whole life in Colorado, kind of Littleton, Highlands Ranch, Cherry Creek or Aurora, I guess, area. Um, was in the Aurora area up until I did one my sixth grade year at Campus Middle School. That would have been the feeder into Cherry Creek High School, and then that's when we moved into Highlands Ranch, um, and went to Ranch View, the feeder middle school, into Thunder Ridge, and then obviously into Thunder Ridge. Growing up, my parents separated when I was about 5 years old. Had a stepdad in there for a bit, but really it was my mom who raised my sister and I. Also graduated in right behind me, 2005 from Thunder Ridge. And so really she was the inspiration in my life. The fact that she was able to hold the household together, provide for us, and kind of be that commonality throughout our whole life. I think really set a precedence of hard work, value in what we had. Highlands Ranch is a pretty diverse community, but I'd say it's sort of on the higher end, and we were sort of on the lower end of that. And she was able to, keep us in those good schools and those good opportunities, under a single parent income, which is not easy. So extremely thankful for that. Her father, my grandfather, was also a really big inspiration in my life, kind of like an old school, almost like door-to-door salesman type person. He could sell you the clothes that you're already wearing type of guy. And he was just really known for his ability to talk to people, find commonality. So he was always a big inspiration and sort of the patriarch figure in my life. Probably up until high school. I played sports my whole entire life from, five all the way up until even after high school, but that's just like for fun things and stuff like that, not like in college or anything. But always been active, but I didn't really take it very seriously. It was just for fun for me until we got to high school, and you kind of get with the other students and you start competing, and then Thunder Ridge was full of them. Very lucky. The coaching staff in almost every sport that I was involved with, and found a lot of some of the stuff I was missing in life in that father figure. Good role models, strong personalities that push you past your comfort zone. Um, you know, helped you helped me really build the foundation of integrity, hard work, and stuff like that. So played football 4 years, played baseball 1 year, then wrestling 1 year, and then track for the rest of the years. Was a girls basketball manager, which kind of sounds a little out there, but that was actually one of the better things I ever did under a state championship team that they did, and that was awesome with Emily and Abby Wayner and Emily Fox, and that was a pretty amazing team to be a part of. So yeah, then got out, went to college for I would say like a semester and a half, one semester at Western, moved down to Metro in not that I wasn't like capable of school, but I don't think I was in the right mindset or had the maturity level. So kind of went into the workforce for a little bit, doing jobs all over. But I found myself really longing to be part of something bigger than myself. I didn't feel like I was serving, my nation. I just felt like that team aspect that I think the itch was always being scratched when I was playing sports. Wasn't getting felt. I initially went to the recruiting office to join the Air Force because some of my family members had done that. Kind of got a bad vibe from the recruiter. And he sort of frustrated me. And, with that frustrated mentality, the Marine one was right there. And I was like, screw it. I'm just going to go to the harder one. I heard this is a tougher boot camp, hard to get through. Had some conversations with a fellow graduate from Thunder Ridge, Thomas Sagoon, who had recently went through. So, I went and talked to the recruiter, and sort of the rest was history. And I can get into more details on that, but went to boot camp in San Diego. Thankfully, there's kind of a divide in the Marine Corps of whose boot camp is harder and things like that. And I can unequivocally say that I'll take a little bit of hills over humidity and sand
Yeah,
fleas any
yeah,
day of the week.
yeah.
So, yeah. So, and then, kind of been all over during my 20 years, even more so than a lot of other Marines. But
So you decided to do the Marines. I want to get this mindset out a little bit. You said you didn't have the mindset at that point for school. You did later, but you
yeah,
did at that point you didn't have the mindset for school, and you wanted to be something bigger, part of something bigger than yourself. When you decided that you wanted to do military, Ryan, how hard was that? How hard of a decision was that? Because once you join, it's on, right? I mean, you talk about boot camp and how hard it was and all those things. What gave you the confidence to know that you were up for the hard parts, the boot camp, the running the hills and getting through boot camp and all that kind of stuff?
I was actually excited by the challenges. So as I said, it was actually at your all state championship game in 2005. Thomas Sagoon and I went and watched it, and before the game was starting, he was just telling me, I think he had just finished up or shortly thereafter, and he was sort of telling me the different challenges and how boot camp works and stuff like that. And that kind of just got me excited to because I just felt like I really hadn't been challenged. And so shortly thereafter, I made up the mind to go into the military. And then, once I went to the Marine Corps, I was more excited by the opportunity to compete against other people, and see what I was made of, and ended up being really, really successful in boot camp. I did a lot of preparation, I think more so than a lot of people go into. At least that's what it looked like when I first got to boot camp. A lot of people sort of showed up like Full Metal Jacket style and didn't really. They looked like they needed to get in shape quickly. And I actually showed up maybe 20 pounds more muscle than I left boot camp with. And it was basically that light switch came on, and it kind of upset me actually that I didn't really have as much of that drive of when it came to weight training and that kind of stuff, that I could have probably been a more competitive football player if I had that. But for whatever reason, once I decided to join the military, it sort of just turned something on in me, and it really has never left. If anything, it's gotten bigger. And even in the few months I've been doing the internship, I'm pretty much in the best shape I've ever been in my life. And I'm 40 years old now and still doing pretty good in the weight room.
That
So
makes me feel old, Ryan, that you're 40. Now I have to ask this question. What would have happened, Ryan, if you would not have made the decision to go into the military? You said you had kind of stopped school and started working and that kind of stuff. What I know you don't like to look back probably, but what do you think would have happened if you would have made that decision?
so all the foundational things that were sort of in me from, that hard work I saw in my mom, what I learned from you all playing sports, that all existed there. So even in those not like extremely challenging jobs, I was excelling. I was already networking and people were kind of offering me opportunities. So it probably would have been a more sporadic path, but I think it would have still been, I would have still found success
Yeah,
in a lot of ways because I sort of had those foundational principles um, to move forward with. Now, the Marine Corps obviously added on to those, but they can only change you. They say that they can change you quite a bit, but in those 3 months, and they do. There's a lot of things that you do, and that you push yourself pretty hard in sometimes, but um, you see a lot of people that come into the military and they'll sort of regress after boot camp and sometimes they realize that the military maybe isn't from them. And the reason I think I was able to continue was really because of the stuff that existed in me before. So if anything, it just kind of got more polished
that's awesome.
uh, as I continued to, you know, go through. And even in the Marine Corps, I would find myself sort of feeling sort of in a slump. And then it was always like, get back to the basics, tighten up your diet, tighten up your weight room routine, make your bed a little tighter. You really just focus on those smaller things, and it would quickly sort of realign my trajectory, and then I'd get back on path.
So let's get into the Marines now. It's for people who out there who weren't in military and haven't really seen the insides of the Marines and so forth. When you got out of boot camp, what was the next step for you then? Did you have a job already lined up in the Marines that you were going to do? And did you get to go do that job right away?
Yeah, so typically how it works is when you go into the recruiter, or if you did it in high school, you take your ASVAB test, and that sort of gives you an aptitude of what you belong to. When I did mine, they were like, you could basically pick every job there is except for something that touches a tool. So I picked logistics, and within logistics, there's like four potential jobs that you can get. Now you don't know which one of those four you're going to get until after you graduate boot camp, and that's the same for pretty much everyone else that does that. They'll pick it, and there's sort of like you'll like for the Marine Corps we call it Military Occupational Specialty or MOS, and for ours it's a 4 digit or digit numerical number. And so you'll go in the contract with the first two digits of that. So like infantry would be O3, logistics O4, admin O1, intel O2. And when you come out, you get the other two digits, the third and fourth digit. And that's the actual specific specialty that you're going to do at least for that part of your contract until you lat move or sometimes as you progress through the ranks, it sort of changes. So I went in picking logistics for the fact that at least initially I just thought I was going to do it for 4 years, and then maybe finish up school or go into a career. And I just thought that gave me a lot of opportunity outside of the military once potentially completing it. So following boot camp, you have a quick, boot camp leave. Sometimes you can do recruiter's assistance where you go and help try to pull some people in for a couple weeks and then off to. So in the Marine Corps, we all essentially are riflemen first, and then your job second compared to some of the other services. So we all have to go to combat training on top of the boot camp training they give you. Just if you're not in infantry MOS, you go to one that's called Marine Combat Training instead of School of Infantry, and it's only about a month long, vice a couple of months long for the School of Infantry. So you go to that, and if you went to boot camp on the West Coast, your Marine Combat Training is on the West Coast as well. So went to that in Camp Pendleton, California. Um, and then following that is when you go to your schoolhouse, whatever that may be. And they're all over the United States. Sometimes they're joint service, sometimes they're not. Mine happened to be in North Carolina. I'd never even the furthest east I had ever been was actually when we played football in Florida for that first game in 2002, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, went to North Carolina. The school is about 2 months long, and my job was called an embarkation specialist. So basically what that means is you do kind of the general aspects of logistics, but you're in charge of moving your unit when it comes to deploying. And then when you're getting to the end or middle of that school is when you pick sort of your wish list of where you want to be stationed. And the Marines don't have a ton of bases, so basically you just say East Coast, West Coast, or overseas. And because I've never been East Coast, I said East Coast, and that predominantly gets you in like one of four bases. And I ended up in a base called Marine Corps Air Station New River, which is in Jacksonville, North Carolina, kind of by Wilmington. Um, but it's the air station that's one of the two air stations there in North Carolina. And I actually got attached to the first ever MV-22 Osprey unit. Um, so when I first joined the unit, it was basically me, my staff NCO, and that was it because all the aircraft maintainers had gone back to stop learning or stop working on the CH-46, kind of like a Chinook type aircraft. So they were kind of going back to school to get all their qualifications to work on this brand new airframe. Uh, and so it was a unique experience that not a lot of people get. Typically, you go in a unit of 300, 400 people, and you're sort of a little bit lost in the sauce, and you don't get a lot of direct attention. But it was just me and my staff NCO. So it was almost like having a private tutor,
Yeah.
and he was really skilled, and I got to have him immediately pouring his, he'd probably been in 16 years at that time, 16 years of knowledge directly into myself. And I kind of spent the next 3 years with that unit, and they were the first Osprey unit to deploy to Iraq, which I led them, and went out as the lead party for that. And typically that's a job for a staff NCO, and I was only a corporal at the time. So I got a lot of responsibility right away that not everyone gets afforded, and it kind of allowed me to get a few ranks meritoriously and get promoted pretty quickly through the enlisted ranks compared to my peers that
It's
kind of
pretty
came out of
cool.
school.
I I want to go back because realistically, I was sitting there thinking as you're talking, it's like you're a student at Metro State University. Basically, from that point, I think, tell me if I'm right on this time frame, but from being a student at Metro State, making the decision this isn't for me at the time, to 3 years from there, you're deployed to Iraq.
Uh, yeah, let's see. Yep, 3 years. Yep,
How life changes.
yeah.
And I have to ask this question, going back to boot camp. You get on a plane, you fly out to San Diego, and you get off the plane, they put you on a bus. What did you feel at that point? You're on the bus with all these other guys. You show up there, and I know once you show up there, basically all hell breaks loose. What did that feel like to you? What were you scared? Were you anxious? Were you excited? What did that feel like?
Yeah, so I'll even back it up about a day before that. So your parents drop you off, or whoever drops you off at the airport, or actually you get dropped off at a hotel right outside of in Denver, near, kind of close to the airport, I guess, from a Denver standpoint. And it was me and two other people that got enlisted out of the same, or were recruits out of the same recruiting station. And I can tell you, I did not sleep. I would say it was a combination of fear and anxiousness. And then it basically only compounded from there. So, every car ride, every
Hmm.
plane ride, bus ride, it just is like building and building and building. And then it is extremely shocking when you first get there and, step on those yellow footprints. One, that's, a foundational memory in every Marine's heart to step on those, kind of raise your right hand and truly say, I'm doing this, to quickly getting shouted at and getting your hair buzzed down really short. And, everything's by the numbers at that point. You're throwing things in the bag and it's complete chaos for basically the next 3 months. And it is, yeah, and it is intense. I never thought there was such thing as, I told you I was in really good fitness shape. Well, I was sore just trying to stand up straight. I guess I wasn't, didn't have as good a posture as I thought. Little silly things like that. And, you know, it, screaming at the top of your lungs constantly, looking at the Marines that were even 1 week or 2 weeks ahead of you, or I guess they were just recruits at that time, they hadn't become Marines yet, but they're looking amazing, and because they kind of, you could tell the different stages based on like how they wear their uniforms and sort of how they're drilling or marching around, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to be as good at it as them, and you just the competition with your peers automatically starts. They kind of put you against each other to try to strive to be the squad leader or the guide, which is the basically the tip of the top of your company or platoon. Um, yeah, it's intense, but it was really good and kind of gets you really comfortable being in very stressful situations and sort of almost getting relaxed into those situations towards the end. Like I honestly get more stressed out nowadays when everything is like completely chill. That's like kind of more nerve wracking to me. And if something is real high tempo, really like this moving stage that you referenced that I'm in, I get real focused and stuff like that. And I would assume that came from all that boot camp stress and whatnot.
So what kept you going, Ryan? What was your mindset? You mean you go to bed knowing that what 5 hours later, whatever, someone's going to be screaming and yelling you and getting you out of bed, and you got to make your bed and you got to do it all over again. What was your mindset? What did you have something you said to yourself, or was there just something that kept you going, or what was it?
So anytime I'm in a position where there's an opportunity to compete with your peers or anyone sort of around you, uh, that even if it's not necessarily designed to be that, but it could seem that way, I immediately start competing. And I would say it was that. I wanted to be better than every other, there's probably like 110 of us when we started in our platoon. And I wanted to be better than every single one of them. I wanted to yell louder, do more pull-ups, do more push-ups, run faster. Every aspect that I could do, I wanted to outcompete them, eat the fastest, drink water the fastest, basically any I just wanted to be, at the best I could be because I felt like if I'm going to serve my country and I'm going to be away from my family, or, not have the same opportunity as everyone else, that I kind of graduated with or whatever, then I'm going to do the best I absolutely can. And that's sort of what pushed me
That's
through all
awesome.
of it.
And you had to do that really as also being part of a team. Like you were there to pick up your guys who were with you and stuff too. You didn't want to leave them behind or anything. So competing against them while being a leader for them and getting them to be better too is what you probably really excel at.
Yeah, so I definitely I've always been, this is I guess sort of a different tangent, but I definitely have always been like, I guess, in the American Sniper movie, it's sort of at the beginning and the two sons get into a fight, and I think it's sort of like a old school poem, but I always wanted to be, or I always looked at myself as sort of like the sheepdog mentality of, if you've heard that one of there's a sheepdog, sheep, and wolves, personalities out there, which means more of like a protector, I hate bullies. I hate that kind of stuff. So that sort of goes around in that, it was definitely a healthy competition, where not only I want to outcompete my peers, but I don't want to do it by breaking them down. I want to kind of I would rather make them better, maybe even better than me, which makes me try to still compete with them type of mentality. Because the water rising together type thing was sort of my mentality, and
Wow.
there was still a little bit of immaturity towards the beginning, where there was, I would say, a little bit of selfishness of wanting to outcompete them, but that was quickly something that went away almost every time another Marine sort of fell in my charge, and it immediately became, the thing that satisfied me the most, other than being the best I could be, was evolving, even if it's in small increments, anyone that I came in contact with.
And you became such a powerful leader through it all. And we'll get to that here in a minute. Three years after you joined, you are now in a war zone. What was that
Mhm.
like, Ryan? What was that like knowing that you're flying over to Iraq, you're flying into a war zone?
Yeah, kind of the same thing as the boot camp buildup. So, it goes in stages, plane, trains, and automobiles. It's not like you get to Afghanistan easily. You gotta fly, long distances, land in Kuwait, stay there for a few days, wait for, a C-17 that'll take you in the cover of darkness, so that, you have less chances of someone popping shots off at you, and you can fly up high. And then they take these incredible nose dives to sort of avoid aircraft, capable munitions. Um, and you have no idea what to expect. And it's when I got there, I just focused on what I could control, what I could do to support the unit I was in, and allow the pilots of I always look at it as like, what is the tip of the spear of the unit I'm supporting? Because I'm a combat service support job. And in that case, it was the Ospreys, and when I was with MARSOC, it's a special operator, whatever it is. So, it was my job to do everything I could logistically, so that the pilot and the aircraft could do everything it was supposed to do to support the infantry members of the Army and the Marine Corps that were in a little more harm's way than I found myself, at least in the Iraq deployment.
And that's part of being a team, part of being a team. And so you're over there, you're kind of thrown into a leadership position. Again, you're 3 years out of making the decision, I'm going to stop doing college and I'm going to go into this, and now you're in a war zone. And things are happening, I'm sure, fast for you and everything else. How did you slow yourself down to keep learning and keep growing in your position that you were in so that you could serve people better?
So I would say it's kind of twofold. I'm very, this is something that I took away from playing, specifically football at Thunder Ridge under you guys, you and Coach Johnson, is to be humble and allow myself to be coachable, so that when, someone makes a correction, is to not take offense to it, that they're poking holes, that they are seeing the situation through a different lens than you are. And not only did I would take that a step further, is I didn't care if the information was coming from a senior member or a subordinate member. Just because I had a higher tenure, even though it was only 3 years, by the middle of the deployment, I'm already a sergeant. So more than a third or more of the unit is already subordinate to me at that point. I'm taking ideas from everywhere, and I'm listening to them, and uh, allowing their suggestions to influence my decision making. And then also, in the military, we're pretty fond of, you know, you don't do this in college, but we definitely plagiarize. So if there's a good idea and it's already been successful, Why try to sort of reinvent the wheel? So I would be really observant to what I deemed as efficient, safe, effective, ways of going about business, or even ask people who maybe were sort of not doing as successful, and allow that to go into my calculus, and refine how I did that task based off of, that was something that was amazing. They were already working it. Maybe I could try this, tweak it a little bit, make it better than I found it. Or if it didn't look like it was the most efficient way to do it, but it was still meeting the task, I'm still going to sort of adopt it, but then, continue to find ways to refine. And then whoever it's supporting or whatever it's supporting, sort of look for feedback. Hey, we've been doing it like this for a month now. Do you have any feedback on what we could be doing? Is there something that I'm not seeing, or a better way that this support could be provided? And then just constant refinement, and not being married to a situation.
I, I, what you're saying is gold, and it works for business. It works for every type of leadership. I believe the best leaders are humble, competitive, and confident. And really, what you've just described in your last 10 minutes on this podcast are those three things. You're humble because you're okay to go ask people their ways of doing things and how they do it so you can keep learning, growing, and progressing. Didn't matter if they are above you or below you, you're still asking for their input, which empowers them. It gives them confidence. It lets them grow as well. You're competitive because you wanted to be the best, but you wanted others, what you said, water rising together. You wanted to be the best in your unit, but you wanted other people to come with you. So you wanted to compete with them. And then you're confident in making decisions because of those first two things. And that doesn't it matter if it's in business, it doesn't matter if it's in sports, it doesn't matter if it's in military. If you're in leadership position and you're asking people below you, beside you, above you, whatever, for their input and their ideas and everything else, so you can keep learning and make the best decisions, that's going to win. That's going to win every time. You're
Mhm.
describing it perfectly. It's just amazing. After your time in Iraq, how long were you there, Ryan? Was it a year, 2 years? How long were you there?
So I was there about 8 months,
8 months.
a little bit longer. Typically, they were trying to keep most deployments to about 6 months for the Marine Corps at that time, um, because they had, certain units had done several iterations. So that's what they were trying to do. But I was the first one in for my unit in a group, and then I was one of the, there's five of us at the end, and I was the last one essentially out. Uh, and we actually got delayed because of a massive sandstorm. So I was even 2 weeks further than I was. So yeah, I'd say at the when it's all said and done, about 8 months.
Any talking to somebody that's been in a war zone right now, any insights, any epiphanies, any overcoming adversity things that you can share with our listeners that might help them in their life? Because not most of us haven't been in a war zone, right? I'm just going to be honest with you. And you have, and we'll get to some other ones too, but what were some things that you took from that, or you saw some stories that maybe people over here just don't know?
So what I would say that you could, you know, take from those situations is, and it's, I don't know if people give it enough thought, but life, there's so much that we cannot control. That you could try, to sort of hold on to the reins of that bowl and ride it as best you can, but the best you're probably going to do is hang on for 8 seconds. And so what often, I find myself focusing, or those who I thought were really successful in stressful situations, was control what you can. And then it goes sort of back to what I was saying when I would get into those ruts, that it's about it's about going back to the basics. When you get into really complicated situations, it becomes basically your brain is going to go into that fight or flight mode. And what you're going to do is go almost into whatever is sort of your subconscious capabilities. And the only way to sort of refine or affect any subconscious training is through sort of repetitive tasks and some exposure to sort of stressful situations, but not to like shy from being uncomfortable. It would be like get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's as simple as like you don't build a muscle unless you sort of break it down a little bit. Or, if it's hard to always see it in the moment when you're in a really tough situation in life, whether it's the loss of someone important, a big job change, relationship change. It's so hard to see like, it's so easy to go internal in that situation. But if you get past it and you sort of get finally that calm, and then you can look back, you've probably grown a lot in that situation. And it that's what I'm talking about being uh, comfortable being uncomfortable, is realizing that there's so much out of our control. Control what you can, practice refining basic kind of task. In a combat thing for an infantry individual, it's all those weapon tasks. They do. You would think out in the range, the best shooters in the military shoot their weapons 95% of the time without any ammunition. It's drawing, going through, breathing, pulling the trigger, click, nothing happens. Reholstering, doing it all again, over and over and over again. And it's so that when they go through that stressful situation, their body isn't thinking, it's reacting, and now it's reacting with those fundamental things. So you can sort of find that dry fire thing into everyday life. Whatever is the whatever is the specialty that you're trying to refine, boil it down to sort of the most fundamental tasks of it and practice those over and over again. And even when you feel like you've gotten expert at them, but you haven't practiced them in 6 months, go back and do it again and sort of create your own kind of training life cycle. And that way, when you go through those tough situations, you sort of go back to the basics and can pull yourself out of those challenging situations.
It's awesome. So you come home from Iraq. You probably have a choice now, right? Because I think you said you when you first got into the Marines, you were in for 4 years. So you do all this stuff, a whirlwind 3 years for you, including a war zone. You get home, you probably have to make a decision now. Am I going to re-enlist or not re-enlist? What made you re-enlist?
So I was contemplating, like I said, getting out, and I had the opportunity to go. So now it's required, but at the time it isn't. And it's called professional military education, or PME. And there's ones per the rank you currently are. They all have sort of a different name to them depending on the rank that you go to. And this is a little bit later in the Iraqi war at this time, and the base that I was on, because it's an air base, has created so much space that it's as long as you're not out on the times that you're not outside of the quote unquote wire, it's relatively safe. So they started standing up a combat version of that professional military education. And I had the opportunity to go to that month-long training. And prior to going to that training, I was under the mindset that I was going to get out, and go back to school and, use the GI Bill and so on and so forth. Well, went back into that training, and it kind of goes right back into what I was just saying, that it goes right into sort of the infantry type stuff, goes back to the basics of a lot of things that you went over in boot camp. That's when you get the opportunity to mess with the non-commissioned officer sword and drill. So you're learning how to march troops a little bit better. And it's also a lot of leadership uh, fundamentals and stuff like that. It's sort of the first, at the time, it was the first professional military education where they really are trying to hone your leadership skills. And immediately following that, I was the honor graduate of that course. And that sort of remotivated me. And so I actually did the re-enlist, and it was almost out of time. It was like right at the end of my uh, before my unit was going to leave. So I was going to lose the person within that unit that does the reenlistment contracting part called the career planner. And so I quickly go, hey, what do I need to do? I'm going to fill out the re and this guy is actually like a buddy of mine. We would go out when we were in town and stuff like that, prior to going on the combat deployment. So he sort of allowed me to cut through some red tape and get through the package really fast so I could get under contract. And luckily, it was the only time typically logistics MOS doesn't get one, but it wasn't the reason I did it. I didn't even know when I signed up, but I got a little bit of a bonus, and because I did that bonus in Iraq, it was tax free, so it's sort of a win-win. But a lot of times that's when you decide what if you want to do also a B billet. A B billet is where you go and do a separate MOS for a little bit of time. And in the common ones that people know is a recruiter or a drill instructor. Well, I didn't want to do either of those at the time. And so a little known one is called a Marine Security Guard. And that's Marines that get to go out for 3 years, 1 year at each different posting and guard embassies. So I elected to do that because you get a few more incentives to sort of request on your very first enlistment. After that, you're kind of considered a careerist, so they don't throw as much at you to keep you in. So yeah, so I elected to do that right towards then my unit leaves, and I catch up with them about a month and a half later. And basically, I got back from the deployment, I think like July of 2020 or 20, or sorry, 2008. And in August, at some point, I'm up in Quantico, Virginia at Marine Security Guard School, going to do that. And that's about 2 months long of training. And then for the next 3 years, I went to three different embassies, starting with Quito, Ecuador, then Moscow, Russia, and then Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And at that point, it's kind of you have two sort of separate chains of command, and you sort of administratively belong to the Marine Corps, but tactically you fall under the Department of State. So for the next 3 years, I did that.
So I have to ask, because I know it's a lot different now than it is when it was there. What was Russia like?
Well, I knew it snowed there, but I had no idea it was so cold. A lot of people, I guess, we always look at maps sort of, I don't know, maybe because it's on a spinning globe and everything just isn't, but it is as high as, parts of Norway. So it is freezing there. And, uh, it's definitely, a Soviet-esque like buildings, everything sort of looks the same except for Red Square, which is phenomenal. Like it looks like basically Disney World of how like amazing sort of in some of the churches and stuff. Um, I really enjoyed my time there. You typically interact with people your own age when you go out, and a lot of the Russian people that we interacted with were, other than having a bit of an accent, a lot of them spoke English, and they were very similar to myself. At that time, we enjoyed going to a club and dancing and having some drinks and stuff, and we very close with several Russian uh, personalities and things like that, and there wasn't anything from sort of like a political. I wasn't really in the know at that time in my life. I kind of was uh, agnostic to politics. And it, but even if I wasn't, I don't think I would have noticed it.
Yeah.
It seemed completely normal, other than everyone speaking a different language and it looking way different and being really cold. um, but yeah, it was an amazing experience. I met my wife in Quito, Ecuador, which out of the three posts was my favorite. She's not Ecuadorian, she's actually Canadian, but was down there doing school abroad in the Galapagos and kind of
Wow.
finishing up in Quito, the capital, and met her there. So,
What a
that,
journey.
yeah.
What a journey. I mean, that's 6 years now after you made the decision. Now you've been in a war zone. You've been to the East Coast where you've never been. Now you've been to three different countries that you've never been to. And I would assume, Ryan, that your leadership skills and abilities just kept getting stronger and you kept learning. I mean, you didn't have to go to school for that. All through this whole process, what were some of the things that you took that you still use today in your leadership journey? Because now you're going into business and some leadership stuff in business now. What were some of the things that you took out of that?
Well, so I would say I kind of refined my thought process on that humility. And what I realized over time was that it was, I would say, more so about my leadership refining the individuals underneath me, was more so that the different personalities and the different opportunities to lead them was actually what was building and improving my ability to lead others in the future. So, what I've really learned over the years was the biggest change in continuous improvement in my leadership skills was the different people underneath me in learning how to manage all these different walks of life through all these different milestones or changes in their lives and still try my best to you'll get people who love to be in the military or love the situation you're in, and those are sort of the easy cases. I wouldn't even say I was leading them, more just kind of like pointing, and they would sort of just do. The actual like sort of leadership challenges were the people who were having a hard time, and it was finding ways to um, meet them at their level, not bring them to your level, and then work with sort of what they were giving you. Um, this is not in any way like a good analogy, but it's sort of like an addict will never uh, seek, will never essentially cure that addiction or at least overcome that addiction without their wanting to do it.
Right.
So you can yell as much as you want, you can force as much as you want, and kind of get the job done. But if you really want to be, efficient, you really want to be effective, it's about meeting them at their level and get, kind of trying to assist them through the process to find common ground and then get that drive for them to want to do it. And then once they get that spark lit, then you can sort of be a little more aggressive in the ways that you do it. But it's more about meeting them at their level, is what I.
Oh, that's brilliant because what you're doing there is you're inspiring them. It's very hard to motivate people, no matter if it's business, it's military, it's sports, whatever. But it's really easy to inspire people to motivate themselves. So what you're talking about there is you've met them at their level and figured out how you can inspire them through their insecurities, their frustrations, their um, lack of maybe not buying into the military fully and the military ways, I guess I should say fully.
Mhm.
But you found ways to get down to their level, figure out who they are. That's empathy. You put yourself in their shoes, which is another great quality of leadership. You empathize with them, and then you figured out ways to inspire them, to motivate them in a different way. Because in the end, what you just said is true. Everyone needs to own their own motivation. And you do that by inspiring people, and you do that by getting to their level sometimes to figure out how you can inspire them at their level, not at
Mhm.
your level or somebody else's level, at
Mhm.
their level, who they are, where they're at. And you said it so brilliantly. These people come from different backgrounds, different places, different ways of raised. Like you were raised by a single parent. Some of these guys maybe had both parents. Maybe they had everything given to them. Maybe some of them didn't have any parents. Well, you figured it out that I have to go to their level and figure out who they are, where they came from, and then inspire from there up. Brilliant. Brilliant. It's one of the best things that's ever been said on my podcast. I appreciate you saying that. Now, you also went to, um, how many deployments did you actually have into war zones?
Two.
Two.
So after my time at the embassy duty, once I wrapped that up, I was picked to go to, at the time it was called Marine Special Operations Battalion, or now it's called Marine Raider Battalion, but that's essentially the part of the Marine Corps that is underneath SOCOM, or the Special Forces Command.
Wow.
So, uh, you know, come out of so I'm with my now wife, and you're not on that program. You kind of got to sign something, and it has to do with your clearance levels and whatnot. But you can't get married. So I meet her long distance relate. I met her 2 weeks into it. So for the next 3 years, we do a long distance relationship, and we met maybe 4 times at for 2 week periods every once in a
Wow.
while in that 3 years. And so we get married on the in the hit show 90 Day Fiance, because that's the type of visa we got. We get married. I immediately tell her, hey, I've talked to this unit. They kind of have a plan, because companies in these special operations companies, all the actual like operators, so the no kidding shooters or special operators, are always sort of formed into their companies in the enablers. Unless you're like a communication or a medic, those are always permanently assigned to them. But the combat service support and then the intel guys will sort of latch on a certain day within the deployment cycle, which is normally 180 days out from the deployment. Well, when I came in, I immediately, met with the battalion, and I said, listen, I did 3 years of logistics, and then I just went and did 3 years of embassy duty. I need some time to sort of get the cobwebs off my logistics skills again. So, after working with them, I, think I'm deploying in like a year and a half upon checking in there. So I tell my wife that. I said, good thing we're going to be able to spend all sorts of time together, finally. And that was definitely not the case. So I got there in August of 2011. So right before the Christmas holiday, uh, the person essentially that was ahead of me and already in the workup cycle essentially gets fired. And a lot of combat service support individuals, specifically in the job that I would be doing for that company, were getting fired because they were trying to essentially be special operators and not be the logistician assigned to them.
Helping you.
Um,
Yeah.
I didn't know that at the time. All I was told was this dude got fired. So immediately upon, once you get back, we see you already have leave in for the holidays. Once you get back, let's say it's for January, you're going on a pre-deployment site survey to Afghanistan. Um, and I thought a site survey, at least at that time in my career, was like 2 weeks long. Well, I went to Afghanistan for like almost 2 months for a site survey. So I go to Afghanistan for 2 months, and then they said by the in this is a requirement in the special forces, um, you have to go to SEER school, which is a survival and evasion school, where essentially it got started after Vietnam, because so many people were getting captured, like specifically pilots behind enemy lines, and it's supposed to sort of at least initially teach you how to survive if your plane went down, and then once captured, here's the methods to survive sort of the capture. So I the day I get back from Afghanistan, I get one day off, and then I immediately went into the SEER training, which is a 1 week kind of classroom training, and then 1 week in the field, where you get very minimal food and that, and then I find myself joining the company. And like I said, typically the enablers join 180 days out from deployment. And this is now at this point, probably like 90 days out from deployment. So I have to like catch up. The guy before me got fired, so it's not like he was doing a great job. And catch up. And then I found myself in Afghanistan. And that was a lot more kinetic of deployment, not an air wing, not a base where I have miles and miles of safety around me. Like I was in uh, the Helmand Valley, the most probably kinetic, dangerous part of all of Afghanistan. And yeah, so that was very rapid. Um, uh, I had an executive officer at that time, and you can look him up. Actually, he got interviewed when he was out there because he's this guy just is such a special case. So this executive officer, he is a special forces operator, officer type, was deployed a year prior, basically from the day that we ended up going out there. So that's sometime in the late spring, early summer of 2012. So in 2011, spring, let's say, he hit by an IED, loses both legs above the knee, which, I didn't know there was sort of categories, but if you can keep your knee joints, it's, glass half full type mentality, it's better because then you sort of have the articulation. This guy's above the knee, double amputee. And a year later, he's deploying to Afghanistan as the executive officer of a special operations
Jeez.
company. And so this guy's the guy directly in charge of me. And so obviously I look at that guy like he's a god among men. And I like there's nothing I wouldn't do for him. There's no amount of work. So he sort of set a precedence, not a lot of detail, but he was like, listen, these guys are special operators. They're going to be in very dangerous situations. They are prima donnas. They will ask for literally everything. And I want you to do everything in your power to try to get it for them. And if you absolutely have to say no, but give a solution behind that no. Like, no, I can't get you that exact thing you're asking for, or no, I can't meet your timeline, but I can, do this. And I would say that's sort of like been uh, something I've carried with me from that point forward is sort of like it's quick to yeses, but very slow to say no. And I intend to keep that going in the business environment as well. Too often, I feel like, especially in support roles, people take the easy road and kind of go with the no. And in my opinion, I'm in a customer service role, even in the military, and so I try real hard not to ever say no to someone. Um,
Well, I
and if
like
I
what you said too. If you do have to say no, you have a solution.
Right. Yeah, don't
That's
just say no and hope that they make up the solution for you. Offer something in that time, or say, I don't have an answer for you right now. Give me a little bit of time. I will come back to you and touch base with you in the next little bit. Give me a little bit more time to work it. Don't ever leave it hanging out there, so they're just wondering, that let them know that you're still actively working on it and it didn't just die on the vine and, you're waiting for a callback type thing.
some more brilliant leadership stuff right there for people to take in. Ryan, we're almost at an hour, if you can believe that. I could go probably 2 or 3 hours with you. What was your rank when you retired?
Chief Warrant Officer 2. So I switched over um, short, basically after MARSOC, I went to an F-18 unit, and about halfway through there, I was a gunnery sergeant, so an E7, and decided to put in my warrant officer package, and become basically a specialized officer in logistics. So
Amazing. And you went to American Military University. Real quick, what is that?
so there's about like four colleges that the military partner with, but that one's basically a DeVry, or it's an online school, but that's specific. It really takes a lot of your training that you already get through the military, and it allows it to translate mostly into like the elective type credits, but it gives you a good chunk out of your bachelor's degree to knock that out. So,
Wow,
yeah.
you're
So,
amazing. Married now? Do you have kids?
yep. I've been married for almost 14 years and have two kids, two boys, 10 and 7.
That's awesome. Yeah, you just have no idea when you choose a profession like teaching and coaching, like I did. You do it for this reason right here. You do it to see where the kids that you taught and coached ended up when they're 40. And what you've done from the time you graduated high school till right now is simply amazing. Your mindset, your mental toughness, your grit, your determination, your perseverance is second to none. It's going to keep carrying you in the next phase of your life. It's just amazing what you've done. I wrote a book, Ryan, and it's called The Three Ps: Find Your Purpose, Perspective, and Passion.
Mhm.
So to end my podcast, I always ask my guests those three questions. What's your purpose in life?
I would say it's to be a servant leader.
Yeah,
So, to like I said earlier, it's to compete with individuals, but do it in a manner that is improving, sort of everyone around me, and improving, my neighbor, the employees I work with, other coaches that might be on the volunteer little league team that I coach, or whatever it is just find opportunities to help those around you grow and become better humans.
unbelievable. And passion. What's your passion? What do you love to do?
So I would say I love to anything fitness. I love to be outside, and then uh, coaching. I haven't had as much opportunity as I'd like just because of how deployed and whatnot I've been. But in the few opportunities I've gotten, I've loved to see little changes in the kids and things like that. So I think that's sort of the next chapter uh, is finding opportunities in that, and trying to build the next generation.
It's pretty amazing how your purpose and passion help each other and support each other.
Yeah.
So what holds it together though, because things come at us. You've been in war zones. You more than anybody, more than most of us realize that things come at you in a war zone that try to take you out of your purpose and passion, that try to make you say, why am I doing this? I can imagine during your career in the Marine Corps, there was probably times where you said, why am I doing this?
Mhm.
Coaching, you're going to say that. You're going to say that. What's your perspective that holds that together, that keeps you in there, that keeps you in your purpose and passion? When something comes at you that's not great, what keeps you in that purpose and passion?
I go back to the little things. I was doing a little flag football coaching this last since we've been here in Tucson, and the team after my son's team, their coach hadn't been showing up, so they're a little bit older. And I said, "Hey, this is kind of unsat. I'm going to help coach these boys today for the game. They deserve this." And is a little bit older, so they immediately sort of respond to some of the critiques you give, or hey, do this, try this. And when you see sort of that click happen in those individuals, like regardless of all the challenges, just watching that little change in them, or the excitement they get because they, got a bigger play, or even scored or caught an interception or something like that. And you helped sort of steer that. And not like it was my reward, but the joy that they sort of just got in the excitement of doing something, or learning sort of that next step. That that that's a drug that I could get high on for the rest of my life.
Well, all the best in your next adventure. Why don't you tell them who you're going to go to work for here?
Yeah, so I'm going for, I went with this big organization with the Marine Corps, and so I'm looking for something smaller. And so it's a family-run business that's been around for 60 years and incorporated for 40 years. It's called Reedhurst Trucking. I'm going to be there, at least initially, be their operations manager, and with working up towards their COO. So doing that out of Pocatello, Idaho, which I didn't even know was a place until I got offered the opportunity. Went and toured it though, very similar to the hills in Colorado or Castle Rock. Looking for those familiar, and yeah, so looking really forward to doing that, and for the next chapter in my life, still trying to serve. That they have all those employees that are thirsty for some kind of leadership and some management, and looking forward to that.
Always serving, always serving. All leaders should be serving.
Yeah.
How lucky is Reed Hurst Trucking?
Yeah.
to have you coming in. You're an amazing man, and I'm
Yeah,
so proud of you. Um,
and I and I would say for those listening, the one thing that is now my newest focus and kind of something I matured into that I want to you know maybe inspire others to do if it's not their skill, not their number one skill, is just become a better listener. That's kind of my mantra. Uh, is I did well. I still was an effective leader, but I'm always looking to improve in the area right now that I really want to focus on is my ability to not just listen, but active listening and hearing them, almost trying to ask enough questions that sort of get them to come up with the idea that you already sort of have in your mind.
yeah,
And that's where I'm trying to take this.
that's beautiful. That's the best way to coach and lead right there. Why is listening so important?
It's important because it once again it sort of meets them at what they need. It also allows them to be heard. It shows how much you care and actually want to develop them. And when that idea comes from them, that motivation behind it is just compounded compared to something that I come up with and
All right.
say, if you do this, you might get better. If it comes from there and it's their idea, their buying is going to be exponentially better.
And their confidence and
Absolutely.
their empowerment and their ownership in it. And I have a saying, and I'll leave you with this. My saying is, you need to learn to listen so you can listen to learn.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's
everyone that you're talking to, you can learn so much from. And be intrigued by everyone that you lead. They have every single person that you are leading has an intriguing story of their own. Learn how to listen to it. Learn how to, like you said, get to their level in terms of, and we're not saying get, this kind of stuff. I'm just saying get to their level of where they grew up, how they grew up, what they do, what made them tick, what learn from them. Learn their story. And once you have got that intrigue inside of you for the people that you're leading, man, are you going to care about them and empathize with them more and just be a better leader with them? This has been gold. I knew it would be. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know your time is limited. And thank you so much for your service. 20 years of the Marine Corps is something that I hope that you've celebrated, um, personally have celebrated. I know people have celebrated it with you. I hope that you've patted yourself on the back and celebrated it yourself because it's an unbelievable accomplishment. And I got goosebumps thinking about this right now. Thinking about back when you played for us and what you've done and how you served me and our country and it's just you're amazing, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'd be remiss without saying, like, I continued to say it, but the foundation that you and Coach Johnson and the others, Coach Ackerman put into us, I absolutely would not be where I'm at today without how you guys led us and pushed us beyond what we thought we were capable. So you kind of started the momentum, and I've just been riding it or trying to find ways to improve on it ever since.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That means the world to me that you said that. Somebody coming from you. People, thank you. Thank you for joining us this week and listening to Ryan Nichols. What a great example of what an American should be. Servant leader, helping and serving people all the way through 20 years in the Marine Corps. Now he's going to be doing that for the people at Reedhurst Trucking and just proud as heck of them. And I thank you so much for listening to this week's edition of the People Progressing Podcast. And like I always tell you, please keep progressing and moving forward. Thank you so much and have a great week.